We all come from somewhere in the world. It's pretty well known that Canada's population is made up of a mix of people, all different ethnicities, all different cultural backgrounds. While America is known for being more of a melting pot, where all different cultures are assimilated into one, Canada is known as being more of a mosaic, reflecting all the diverse cultures of everyone who comes here as one big culture. Some of that mosaic is even within my own family. During the 1950s, a few of my family members moved here from different areas of Europe. My grandmother on my father's side came to Canada from Holland with her family when she was 10 years old, and my great-grandparents on my mother's side came here from post-war Italy a few months before my grandfather was born in the hopes of starting a better life. To tell the truth, I know a little bit more about their story. They came here knowing no English and with only one suitcase holding everything they brought with them. From the stories I've heard, I know they worked really hard after coming to Canada. I never actually knew my great-grandfather, but in the present day, my great-grandmother is now 88 years old and perfectly happy here in Canada with no wish to ever go back to Italy. She says Canada is now her home. On that note, Canada's culture has changed a lot over the decades, and most of that has been due to immigration trends. Who moves to Canada from where and when and why they do. With that in mind, I started wondering, what have Canada's immigration trends been like over the years, and how have they affected Canada's culture? So I did some research, and here are some of the things I found. Immigration to Canada has been a thing ever since the settlers first started coming here, but back then it was mostly just people from France and the UK who were coming to Canada. However, some immigrants from Germany, Switzerland, Ireland, and Scotland also came here during the 18th century, as well as many American loyalists who came up during the American Revolution. In fact, some of my own ancestors were loyalists who came up to Canada from the US. During the 19th century, there wasn't much change in who all immigrated to Canada. It was still mostly English, American, Scottish, and Irish people coming here, although the potato crop famine in Ireland in the 1840s sent huge waves of Irish immigrants to Canada. Towards the end of the 19th century, the prairie provinces had a large intake of immigrants with a high demand for wheat and farm goods. In the 1900s, 10s, and 20s, more people from more different countries started coming to Canada and immigration rates were extremely high, but they dropped again during the Great Depression and both World Wars. However, a lot of racism also tended to go along with immigration in Canada in the early 20th century. The government had a condescending preference of ideal immigrants to Canada, with most European immigrants being at the top of the list and people such as Jews, Asians, and black people being near the bottom. During World War I, there was a lot of resistance against German and Asian immigrants, and groups of immigrants such as Italians, Jews, Polish, and Serbians were encouraged to fight in their home country's armies. During World War II, there was also a lot of resistance against Asian, particularly Japanese, immigrants, as well as refusal to accept Jewish immigrants persecuted by Hitler into Canada. After the Second World War, however, immigration policies were eventually changed so that there was no discrimination against any European immigrants. However, while immigration from countries such as Italy, Greece, and Portugal swelled in Canada during the 1950s, Eastern European immigration dwindled with the start of the Cold War. In the 1960s, the last of Canada's discriminating barriers were taken down so that anyone from anywhere could immigrate to Canada. And throughout the 1970s, more immigrants from outside of Europe started coming to Canada, and this has continued to be the case every year after that. In the present day, pretty much anyone from anywhere can immigrate to Canada. And in the last 30 years, it's been mostly refugees coming here, and more people from Asia and the Middle East rather than Europe. Canada is considered to be one of the most open countries to new citizens and receives several thousand immigrants and refugees every year. So, with all that in mind, how have immigration trends affected Canada's diverse culture? Well, here are a few examples. For one thing, Canada's population is extremely racially diverse. All different colors, skin colors, all different ethnicities, and Canada in the present day is well known for being so racially diverse. That wouldn't be the case if it hadn't been for different immigration trends over the years. Another example can even be found in who does what jobs. Traditionally, immigrants have often taken on jobs that most current Canadian citizens wouldn't be as quick to take. These often end up being a lot of industrial or serving jobs and less glamorous than most white-collar jobs. Would these job trends be the way they are if it hadn't been for such immigrants taking them on over the years? Another way that Canada has been affected is in the different aspects of other cultures that have become part of Canada's. Things such as food, art, recreation, customs, and holidays come with immigrants and refugees who move to Canada. And if enough immigrants are in a certain group are practicing these practices, then they can slowly become part of Canada's culture. Without certain groups of immigrants, a lot of these trends wouldn't be the way they are. Wouldn't be part of Canada's culture if it hadn't been for these immigrants who came here. These are just a few examples of how immigration has affected Canada's culture. There are many more, but if you think about it, Canada's culture really has been massively affected by immigration trends. After all, we all come from somewhere in the world.